So hi everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is John Lunn, aka Johnny Chips, and in today's video we're going to take a look at the Azure Migrate Appliance and really what it takes to download, install, configure that appliance in order to get it set up ready to create a server assessment across our infrastructure. So hi everybody, thanks for tuning in. Like I say, today we're going to take a look at Azure Migrate in order to prepare a server assessment for your on-premise hypervisor platform. You can obviously use Azure Migrate to conduct assessment over physical equipment as well. But for now, we're going to jump in and take a look at the Azure Migrate documentation quickly and then delve into an environment that I've got set up and see how we can conduct one of those assessments. So what I'm looking at here on the screen is we've got the Microsoft Docs Azure Migrate area. It's a great source of knowledge. If you're not familiar with the Microsoft Docs areas, anything that you're looking for, do a quick search, jump on in. It'll give you some really great overview and insight as to what you need to do, how you get things set up, and some great tutorial information there as well. So I've already worked through this to a certain extent, but just give you a little bit of a background as to what we've got set up here and what we're going to actually try and achieve is on this machine. So I'm running a Windows 10 machine at the moment with HyperV installed. I've got a couple of virtual machines. They're Windows Server 2016 virtual machines. I've got a domain controller and a little file server, and I can grab those off to the side here so you can see. There's my file server, and I've got a domain controller. So like I say, they're running locally on my Windows 10 computer that I'm on recording this video. And if you check the instructions for the Azure Migrate Appliance, it doesn't actually say that it supports Windows 10. I've had to do a little bit of a jiggery pokery with the permissions on the WinRM service running on the Windows 10. It seems to be working okay. So for now, I'm going to use this as the example. So let's jump straight in. So I've got on this machine now, I've got my Azure tenancy logged in, and I'm logged into my subscription here, and I browse the Azure Migrate area. But before we jump into this area, there's one thing that we need to set up, and that's to get a resource group configured. So before we can create the project for Azure Migrate, we need to have a resource group configured to store that in. So I'm going to select my subscription. I'm going to give my resource group a name, Johnny Chips -migrate. And I'm going to select my region as UK South. I'm not going to be too worried about any tags at this stage. I'm just going to click on Review and Create. Should pass the validation. We click Create, and there we go. We've got our resource group created straight away. So if we head on over to the Azure Migrate pane, we can see that Azure Migrate gives us a number of different options. We can look at servers, we can look at SQL and other databases. And there's more scenarios as well, including things like VDI and various other migration activities. But for now, we're gonna start straightforward and simple. We're gonna focus on the Windows and Linux servers, and in particular the Windows servers. I've got those two servers running locally at the moment. So if we go ahead and click on Assess and Migrate Servers, first thing we can see is we've got nothing set up. So the first thing we need to do is create what they call a project. So I click on that button. We're already in our subscription. I'm going to select that resource group that I've just created, and I'm going to give this a project name. So I'm just going to call it John Migrate. That can be my project name for now. And I'm going to select my geography as the United Kingdom, as that's where I'm located. So if we click on Create, that shouldn't take too long, probably about 15 seconds or so, I think, to get that created. There we go, even quicker. So what we do then, what we can see is that's taken us over to this area under our servers tab here on the left. We've got these things called assessment tools set up now, and you'll notice we've got an assessment tool set up of the Azure Migrate service. And if we scroll down, you can see we've got this migration tools area. We're not going to focus too much on the migration tools in this video. We might come back and look at that a little later, but for now, the important thing to note is that we've got this tooling that we're using called Azure Migrate, and if we click on here, we can see that there are actually a number of other third-party tooling providers available. Some do come with costs associated, but you know they are there. They've got various different feature sets involved, and they're for various different focus areas as well. So Obviously, you've got those that you can look into, but for now, we're going to focus on actually using the Azure Migrate, the appliance itself, to do our server assessment. So we're at this stage now. We've created our resource group, we've created our project, we've got the Azure Migrate service set up as an assessment tool. The next thing to look at is the Discover section. So if we click on in there, we'll see we've got this quite neatly guided series of steps that we just need to run through, basically. So we've got really good information to help you choose about whether you want to import CSV or use an appliance. I'm going to try and keep this as straightforward as possible. We're going to be using an appliance. We've got hypervisor running as HyperV on this local machine. So you've got options. You've either got physical kit that you can install agents on. You've got HyperV or VMware. As I say, I'm running HyperV. So I'm going to select that option. The next thing that we move down to is we've got step 1. Essentially, we need to create a migration project key, which is a long string that we use to configure our appliance in a later step. So it's asking us to name the appliance. So I'll go ahead and call that Johnny Chips Azure Migrate 01. And I'm going to click on this generate key. So what that's doing now is it's going off and it's actually creating that key for me. And what I need to do is I need to save that key once it's created in an area that I can obviously retrieve it to input that on my Azure appliance in a few steps later down the line. So for now, that shouldn't take too long. It took about 30-40 seconds or so last time. So in a second, we should see that. So there we go. So that's now created, and there's our project key. So if I click on copy to clipboard, go back to my notepad, paste that in there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to save that. I've actually got a map network drive to my to my area on my little file server. There we go. So if I click there, there's a file called Azure Migrate Key. Yes, I'm going to replace that. I've now saved that key onto my file server so that I can pick that up in a later step. I'm going to close that down for now, and we're going to move on to step 2. So step 2, for the sake of timing, you've got 2 options here, essentially. You've got the ability to download a VHD file that you can set up your own virtual machine, or you can just download the smaller zip file of the actual appliance itself that you can install on your own server. So I downloaded this VHD file. I've got quite a fast internet connection, so I pre-downloaded that, and I've got that sat under my Hyper-V area. So that bit is effectively done. The next bit now is to set up the appliance, and we can quickly check the prerequisites. Like I say, if we click on this, just open that up and we can have a quick scan through it. So it really gives us some good information about the limits and the limitations on what we can do from an assessment point of view, project perspective, how many VMs can we expect to be able to discover with a single appliance. So in this case, 5,000 at the moment, at the time of me looking at this. And it's telling me that the Hyper-V, the number of Hyper-V hosts that the appliance can connect to is up to 300, which obviously is great because I'm connecting to 1 in my environment. So I really do advise scanning through some of these prerequisites and just having a little read through so you get a little bit more familiar with what your limitations may or may not be. So for now, our next step really is we need to set up the appliance. So fundamentally, it's given us some guidance here that we can either set it up from the VHD file we downloaded, or we can execute the PowerShell script that's in that zip file and install it locally. So my option is the former, and it's saying that we should look at a server 2016 running 16 gig of RAM, 8 virtual CPUs, and roughly 8 gig of hard disk. Okay, so I'm going to jump on over to my Hyper-V manager, and I'm going to click on New Virtual Machine. So what I've done, I've just before I click in there, I've downloaded the image, I've extracted it, and there it is. So it gives us this folder here that's got, essentially it's got just the VHD here that's under the virtual hard disk folder. So what you'll see is that it has no virtual machine settings as such. It's got a bare XML file in there to begin, but fundamentally it's got no virtual machine configured. So what I'm going to do is use Virtual Machine Manager to create a new VM. I'm going to call it in line with my naming convention, Azure Migrate 01. I'm going to store the virtual machine in a different location just because I've got a nice large disk there that I want to store it in that folder structure that I've just downloaded. Select that folder and click next. We can leave this as a Gen 1. It did say that we wanted, I think it was 16 gigs of RAM. I'll just put that, it's near enough for me for now. I don't want to use dynamic memory for now. So I've already pre-configured this internal Hyper-V switch, and that basically is on my local machine. It's an internal network that's got its own subnet and an IP range, but it's actually using my network connection on my local machine for internet connectivity. So I'm going to select that as my networking configuration. Click next. We don't want to create a new virtual hard disk because remember we just downloaded it. So I'm going to use the existing virtual hard disk, which if we browse to our D drive, our Migrate Appliance, our hard disk there. So we can select that hard disk. That's the large file we've just downloaded. Click on open. We can click next. It'll give us a quick summary of everything we've just configured. So of course, I've hooked it up to this switch. For everybody's benefit, there's no DHCP running in that environment. So I'm going to have to manually give that a static IP address, which I'll leave in the recording so you can see what I'm doing. We'll click finish. Couple of seconds. There we go. We've got our virtual appliance now all set up. The next thing we just need to do is we'll connect to it through Hyper-V Manager, and we will click on Start. And that should fire up the starting of this virtual machine. So I'm going to pause it there. It may take a couple of seconds to start up. And we will probably have to go through setting up some administrative log on to the machine. So I'm going to pause the video there for a second, and we'll come back once it's ready. Okay, so we've got the license terms page now that's just popped up. That took a couple of minutes there just to get the actual virtual machine to a level. So let's click through these license terms. We'll click on accept there, and we're going to give this appliance an administrator password, and we're going to click on finish. So this is just going to finalize the settings and hopefully present us with a login prompt. So there we go. Just like any other VM, so you can see it's set to, I believe these are set to Pacific time, US. So if we just log in, not that that should really matter, but just in case you're wondering why that's showing us 4:40 AM. So let's log in to the appliance with our password that we've just set. So remember, this is at this moment in time for me, in my environment, this is going to be a standalone appliance, because although I've hooked up the switch, I got no DHCP running, so I'm going to have to quickly put a static IP address on this appliance, which won't take long. So we just let the appliance fire up. I'm going to pause the video again there for a second because it does take sometimes a little bit to set the profile up. So there we go. We're all logged into our appliance now. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do is just go into my network interface card settings. Like I say, because this is a standalone machine, I'm going to need to apply a static IP on the server. In your environment, if you're going to put this onto a particular switch in your Hyper-V cluster or your VMware, it's going to be odds on. You've obviously got that set up for at least some form of dynamic IP assignment. So we're going to click on properties of our interface card. So running a little bit slow for some reason at the minute, but we'll forgive that. I'm going to click on IPv4, double click it. I'm just going to set this as a static IP to the subnet that internal Hyper-V switch is on. So I'm going to give this appliance the IP of 137.250. It's a 24-bit subnet mask, and I'm going to use the IP of my interface switch interface as the default gateway. DNS, like I say, I can use my own internal DNS because I got a little domain controller set up. So I'm going to use my domain controller as my DNS server, and I'm going to click OK and OK again, and close that down and that down. Okay, so we've got all the network configuration done. So if we fire up Internet Explorer now, This can take a little while to load, a few seconds or so, but we should be prompted by the appliance config manager page. So the first thing that we need to do is click through and just agree to the terms of use. And the next thing that you're going to see then is that the appliance is going to kick in and run through a series of prerequisites. So it's going to check to see if you can connect to Azure. It's going to see that the time is in sync with Azure. And then it's going to check if there's any updates installed. So I think the last time I tried this, there were a few updates that it will install. So what I'll do, I'll let that do it and we'll come back in 1 second. And there we can see that a new update is actually being installed on the appliance. So if we just click on refresh, and there we go. We can see that the prereqs have got nice green ticks, which is what we like to see. We can set up proxy details if we need to, and we can also click through and see with the services that run in, make sure everything's okay on the appliance. But step 1 looks to be complete, which is great. We're moving to step 2 now. So if you remember that key that we generated earlier on, we just need to paste that in here. So I'm going to browse to my file server, which was on this IP, and I created a share on the E drive. So there's my little notepad file. So if I double click that, I'm going to select and copy that string, and I'm going to paste it in here and click on login. So what this login is going to do now, it's going to ask me to provide the code, which you just flick back to your config manager and you can see that there's a code for the appliance there. We copy that, we paste that into the code area, and then we'll be prompted to log on with our Azure AD credentials. So let me just log in. And of course, the keyboard is set up for US, so just be wary of that. So I've got MFA assigned on this particular account, so I'm going to answer my phone and hit the hash key. There we go. So my sign-in has been verified. And what it's telling me there now is we signed into Azure, so we can close this particular window down. And you can see that it's initializing now the application registration up with our project in Azure. So it does say this can take up to 10 minutes. To be honest, in my experience, it has only taken a minute or so to do that. So let's just pause that there for 1 second. I'll come back when it's done. And there we go. So yeah, that only took about 60 seconds or so. But you can see we've now got a nice green tick on step 2. So that effectively has now registered itself with that project that we created earlier in our Azure tenant. So let's look on down to stage 3 then. So this stage is where we're going to provide the credentials to allow this appliance to log on to our hypervisor cluster. So that could be, in my case, my HyperV manager. It could be your VMware cluster, your HyperV clusters, whatever you've got set up. You need to provide a series of credentials, and this could cover a multitude of different clusters, and for whatever reason you may have different credentials. So what we need to do in step 3 is provide a way that appliance can actually use credentials to log on to your hypervisor. So in my case, obviously I've just got a single machine which has got a local admin account set up on it, and I'm just going to use that. So I'm just going to enter my credentials in there and click on save. Obviously, in your case, when you're looking at your organization, you should know what credentials you can use to gain access to your hypervisor. Like I say, because this is a local install of my Hyper-V on my machine, I'm just using the local machine account to get access to that. But in reality, you're probably not going to be using an administrator account in there. The next step in part 3, so step 2, is to provide the IP, the fully qualified domain name, the access. How does it get to your hypervisor cluster of choice? So they call that the discovery source. So I'm going to click in there. In my case, I've just got a single item that I need to add. But you've got the option, if you've got multiple servers or services, or so many that you've got a CSV file. It's quite neat that the appliance allows you the ability to kind of import that way as well. But for me personally, I'm going to have a single Hyper-V host. I'm going to use my local admin credentials, and my host IP is the IP of my local machine that I'm typing to you on now. So I'm going to save that, and it goes through this little validation process. So the kind of little tweaks that I thought wasn't applicable to the video is that I just had to enable WinRM on my machine. I had to enable the firewall to allow those ports through for WinRM to work. This appliance can speak via WinRM across that port. I just had to tweak that. I thought I wouldn't include it in the video because it was a little bit of a distraction. But what you're looking for is that this validation becomes successful. So essentially what you've done is you've added your credentials, you've told the appliance where your hypervisor host or cluster is, and this is the appliance just saying, great, I can log on, I can get access to it. So that's it in terms of configuration. You want to see these nice green ticks all the way down your appliance. There's just this nice button down the bottom that says Start Discovery. So I'm going to click on that. And what that's going to do now is exactly what it says. We're going to initiate a discovery of the Hyper-V VMs. Do you remember I've got 2 VMs here? It takes approximately 2 minutes per host to complete the discovery. You'll be able to view the discovered VMs on the portal and create an on-premise assessment after a few minutes, which is exactly where we need to be. So this is telling me it's going to take a couple of minutes just to do a scan of my hypervisor. It's going to upload that data into my project in my Azure Migrate area. So I'm going to let that do its thing, and let's hop back on over to our area, where if we go back to Azure Migrate, you can actually, before we do that, you can see down the bottom it says after you start discovery on your appliance, you can come to the portal, wait for the discovery to complete, and see the discovered servers in your project, and then you can proceed with the assessment. So that's where we're going to get to with this particular video, is we're going to get to the point of just creating an assessment and just having a quick high-level overview of what that assessment covers. So we click back to Azure Migrate. We click on Discover. We may need to refresh this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause the video again and come back when that's all ready. Okay, so there we go. It's refreshed, and you can see that we've got 3 discovered servers. And the reason it's 3, of course, is that we've got my 2 VMs, and we've also got that appliance sat in there. So it's discovered itself, essentially. So before I click into that discovered servers area, I just want to quickly flick back to my appliance just to see what it tells me there. And it's telling me discovery's been successfully initiated. Go to the Azure portal to review the discovered inventory. So that's exactly what we'll do. So that looks great. We just did a quick refresh up here, and it refreshed this to show us how many servers we discovered. So you can see we've got a few options here. We can create groups, we can create assessments and notifications. As I said earlier, this video is just looking at the assessment. We're not going to worry about the migration just yet. So let's click on Discovered Servers. If we click on 3, we can see that it has actually, in fact, discovered the file server, my appliance, the appliance that we've got set up, and of course, the domain controller. And straight away, I just spot I didn't even give this appliance any more than 1 core. So no wonder it was a little bit slow. That will explain it. Give your VM a little bit more than 1 core. It might be able to do things a bit quicker for you. So I'm not going to worry about that. That's no big deal. So, okay, that's great. We've got some servers that it's discovered, which sounds great. And it's just shown me them in a list. I've got this dependency analysis. Okay, we can add service to this dependency. I'm not going to dig into that just yet, which is great because I think up until relatively recently, the only way that you could really check on dependency analysis was via an agent that you had to install on every VM or physical box. So I think the Azure Migrate team now have built that analysis straight into the appliance so that it can talk over WMI, which is brilliant. So okay, so we've got 3 servers. The next thing that we can do, we can group these. So we can create a group, which I think I will, just for the purposes of creating. Now, this could be used to maybe you want to group specific servers together into maybe a service, like an application group of servers. You may have a bunch of servers that are front-end middleware and backend that you could group into an appliance or an application name. I think I'll just create a group. It's going to we're going to use the discovery data that we've got from the appliance. I'm just going to call it Johnny Chips servers. If we can put a space in this name, yeah, it looks like we can. I'm going to just select, yeah, that's my appliance. I'm just going to select my file server and my domain controller. Obviously, I don't need to do anything with that Migrate appliance. That can be left in there to do these assessments, and obviously it can be left in there to do any migrations at a later date, but I certainly don't want to do, at the end of the project, I'll probably just end up canning and removing that server completely. So I'm going to select my file server and my domain controller and create a group. And then once you've created a group of servers, you can then basically run an assessment. So this is the nub of where we're going to get to with this video, is creating this assessment. We're gonna select, obviously, because we're not using any AVS, we're just going to use an Azure VM straight out solution. So it's going to come back and align me to putting my services into Azure. My discovery source is going to be the machines that I've discovered with my Migrate appliance. It is worth pointing out that you can import a list of servers if you need to in there, just to use the assessment services to include those if you can't scan them or discover them through the appliance or any other method. But for now, I'm going to select that. I'm going to call this Johnny Chips assessment. And we can do a few things with the properties of this assessment. So let's just have a quick look. I'm not going to dwell on it too much. For your own discovery piece, you're going to want to pay a little bit of attention as to what you're going to do. So things like the region that you're looking to move VMs into, they can have an impact on cost and things like that. So make sure you do select the region of choice. Storage type, again, if you're coming from a legacy infrastructure where you've got maybe standard SSDs, or maybe you are using some faster disk as well, and cache disk, you've got the option to kind of select, do you want to use premium storage? Do you want to use standard storage? Or do you just want the appliance and the assessment itself to make the best choice for you? I'm going to leave it on automatic. Again, reserved instances, it's around cost savings effectively. If you want your assessment to report that you're going to commit to a 3-year reserved instance, the cost estimate that it spits out for you in the report will be a little bit lower. So really click on these little eyes. It'll give you links to learn more. I'd suggest you have a little read about what these actually mean. For now, I'm going to leave them as they are. There's no real great shakes for now for the demonstration. Again, VM size. Yeah, again, read into some of these things, because there are some good value to actually understand what each of these elements is going to impact on you. Pay as you go. I'm going to change mine from dollar to British pound. I'm going to suggest that no, I don't have a license because I'm running on evaluation licenses at the moment, so I want the full cost. Yeah, that'll do me. So I'm going to save that for now. I'm going to click on next. I'm going to use my existing group that I just created, which was my servers, which will pull my file server and my domain controller in. I'm going to click on next again. It's going to give me a quick review, the ability just to review what I'm doing. So I'm creating a new assessment. It's based on Azure VM. It's going to use my existing group that I've created and added those 2 machines to. My discovery source is my Migrate appliance that you've just seen me install. The sizing criterion is based on performance. Well, of course, my appliance is not going to have much knowledge on the performance because we've literally just set it up. You can leave this run for a period of time and it can get a really good picture as to how those servers are peaking and falling in terms of CPU usage and RAM usage. So it can do what they call right size the VM. So when it chooses a VM in Azure to select, it will give you something that's going to be realistic, based against what the performance. But there were a few different options you could select for that sizing criterion. Target location, as you saw, we picked UK South. We're basing it on 3-year reserved instances, and we're just saying we're not using hybrid use benefit. So on that note, we shall just click Create Assessment, and that shouldn't take too long. But what we'll do, we'll let that kick off now, and I will come back to you as soon as that's completed. And there we go. That didn't take too long at all, actually, about 30 seconds or so. I've just refreshed my Azure Migrate assessment tool on the Service tab. And you can see it's found the group that we created, and it's now found this assessment. So if we click on this one, we've got one assessment created, and it's my Johnny Chips assessment that I can click into. And there we have it. So this is essentially what we're going to get now. We're going to get a copy of this assessment report. And I'm not going to dig into it too much, but really speaking, this is the first stage that you would have. You imagine if you had tens or hundreds or even thousands of servers, VMs, and physical boxes, this will give you a good state of play as to what is actually ready to be lifted and shifted straight into Azure. How much is that compute actually going to cost you? How much you're going to need to pay on storage? So you can see straight out of the box, within the period of time it's taken me to record this video, I've now got an assessment that I can move forward with and discuss with my business. Do we want to do that? So we can click into these reports and really understand what is ready for Azure and what do they mean. So, for example, my file server, it's telling me that it's ready for lift and shift straight into Azure. It's telling me a suggested tool to use, which is the Azure Migrate Appliance. It's just reporting back my operating system version and the number of disks that I've got on there. So if we click on that, we can see that it's recommending that I use a standard F4 SV2 VM. It's telling me it's going to be roughly about £141 per month, with £14 for the additional disk. It's even recommending which disks I should be using. So 2 standard disks, an S10 and S15, and it's broken down the cost of those disks as well. And it's telling me I've only got one network adapter, so there we go. So all of this information feeds back into the recommendations. So of course, that's where we wanted to get to. So that's brilliant. I mean, hopefully you've got that good knowledge from what this assessment tool is all about. Like I say, I'm not going to drill into that assessment in too much detail at the moment, but hopefully that's given you a really good idea as to what the first phase is. So that aligns with the cloud adoption framework in that readiness phase, which is essentially looking at assessing your server estate and your digital infrastructure. So there we go. On that note, I really do hope you've enjoyed that video. If you've got any comments or suggestions or things you'd like me to look at going forward, please do like and subscribe to my channel. Drop a note below. That would be great. But for now, that's been Azure Migrate Server Assessments, and I'm Johnny Chips. Thanks for watching.